The champagne bubbles tickled my throat as I watched my husband Malcolm standing awkwardly by the wedding cake, adjusting his tie for the third time in 5 minutes. God, he looked so boring in that conservative navy suit, like he was attending a funeral instead of celebrating love. At 34, I felt like I was married to a man twice my age. He's not exactly the life of the party, is he? Cal's voice was warm honey in my ear as he appeared beside me, 2 fresh glasses of champagne in his hands. Callum Finch had this way of making every woman feel like the most interesting person in the room, and tonight was no exception. "That's Malcolm for you," I said, accepting the drink with a smile that lingered too long. Reliable as a Toyota, about as exciting as watching paint dry. Cal laughed, that rich sound that made my stomach flutter. We'd been training together at the gym for 6 months now, and somewhere between spotting me during bench presses and celebrating my fitness milestones, our conversations had shifted from workout routines to deeper things. He listened when I talked about feeling trapped in my suburban life, nodding with understanding when I explained how Malcolm's predictable routine was slowly suffocating me. "Dance with me," Cal said, extending his hand as the band launched into something with an actual beat. Not the slow, safe songs Malcolm preferred, but something that made you want to move your hips and forget about tomorrow's responsibilities. I glanced toward Malcolm, who was now deep in conversation with his mother Gina about proper table settings or some equally riveting topic. He hadn't asked me to dance once tonight, hadn't complimented my new red dress that I'd spent 2 hours picking out, hadn't even noticed that I'd gotten my hair done specifically for this wedding. "Why not?" I said, taking Cal's hand. The dance floor was crowded with other couples, everyone loose from good wine and the infectious joy that weddings bring. Cal's hands found my waist, pulling me closer than strictly appropriate for a married woman, but I didn't step away. For the first time in months, I felt alive, desired, interesting. "You're beautiful tonight, Ulalia," he murmured, using the nickname that made me feel young and spontaneous instead of the practical Ulalia that Malcolm insisted on using in full. The music pulsed around us, and I found myself leaning into Cal's chest, breathing in his cologne mixed with the faint scent of his skin. When he tilted my chin up to look at him, I didn't resist. When his lips met mine, I kissed him back with all the passion that had been building for months. The kiss lasted maybe 10 seconds, but it felt like a lifetime. When we broke apart, I could see shocked faces around us, some guests pretending they hadn't noticed, others staring openly. My mother Vivian was across the room, raising her glass with an approving smile. But it was Malcolm's expression that made my heart race with a mixture of guilt and defiance. He was standing perfectly still, his face pale, except for 2 red spots on his cheeks. Our 9-year-old daughter Nora was beside him, tugging on his jacket and asking something I couldn't hear over the music. His eyes met mine across the dance floor, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Not anger exactly, but a cold disappointment that made my stomach clench. Instead of feeling ashamed, I felt a surge of rebellious energy. This was my life too, wasn't it? Didn't I deserve to feel wanted, to feel excitement, to be more than just Malcolm's reliable wife and Nora's responsible mother? I walked straight over to him, Cal trailing behind me with less confidence than he'd shown on the dance floor. "Don't look at me like that," I said, my voice carrying more than I'd intended. Several nearby guests turned to watch. It was just a dance, just a little fun. God knows we could use some excitement in our lives. Malcolm's jaw tightened, but he didn't raise his voice. He never did. "Ulalia, not here, not in front of Nora." "What's wrong with Mommy and Daddy?" Nora asked, her small voice cutting through the tension. "Nothing, sweetheart," I said, but I kept my eyes on Malcolm. The champagne and the thrill of Cal's attention made me feel reckless, powerful. "Your father just doesn't know how to have fun anymore. He's forgotten what it's like to be spontaneous, to live a little." "We should go home," Malcolm said quietly, reaching for Nora's hand. We should stay and enjoy ourselves, I countered. Unless you can't handle seeing your wife actually enjoy herself. What are you going to do about it, Malcolm? Divorce me? The words hung in the air like a challenge. I was joking, of course, at least I thought I was. It was the kind of dramatic thing you say when you're tipsy and feeling cornered and want to make a point about how uptight your husband has become. Malcolm looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something shift in his expression, not the explosion of anger I'd expected, but something quieter and more unsettling. Come on, Nora, he said simply. Let's get your coat. As they walked away, I felt a moment of uncertainty, but Cal's hand on my lower back reminded me that I wasn't alone, that someone found me attractive and interesting and worth taking risks for. He'll get over it, I told Cal, finishing my champagne in one gulp. He always does. But as I watched my husband help our daughter into her jacket by the coat check, something cold settled in my chest. Malcolm wasn't arguing or pleading or even looking back at me. He was just leaving, calmly, quietly, with the same methodical approach he brought to everything else in his life. Later that night, I found him in our bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed with our old photo albums spread around him. Pictures from our wedding, from Nora's birth, from family vacations, and Christmas mornings, and all the ordinary moments that make up a marriage. What are you doing? I asked, suddenly feeling very sober. He looked up at me with eyes I didn't recognize. Just remembering, he said quietly. Trying to figure out when things changed. I wanted to apologize then, to explain that it hadn't meant anything, that I'd just gotten carried away. But the words stuck in my throat, tangled up with my frustration and my growing feelings for Cal, and my certainty that Malcolm would never understand what I needed. I'm going to bed, I said instead. Malcolm nodded, turning back to the photos. I'll be up in a while. But when I woke up the next morning, his side of the bed was undisturbed, and I could hear him in his study, typing on his laptop, with the same steady rhythm he used for everything else. The week after the wedding passed, in a strange, tense quiet. Malcolm went through his usual routines, making coffee, getting Nora ready for school, grading papers at the kitchen table. But something fundamental had shifted. He was polite, even considerate, but distant in a way that made me feel like I was living with a stranger. You're being ridiculous, I told him on Thursday morning, as he packed Nora's lunch with his usual precision. It was one kiss, one moment of fun at a party. You're acting like I committed some terrible crime. Malcolm looked up from the sandwich he was wrapping. I'm not acting like anything, Ulalia. I'm just thinking. Thinking about what? About us. About what we want. About whether we're still the same people who got married 10 years ago. His calm tone irritated me more than shouting would have. Of course we're not the same people. People grow, Malcolm. People change. They discover new things about themselves. Is that what you call it? The question hung between us as Nora bounded into the kitchen, backpack bouncing against her small frame. She looked between us with the careful attention children develop when they sense adult tension. Are you and Daddy fighting? She asked me directly. No, honey, I said, shooting Malcolm a warning look. We're just talking about grown-up things. After they left for school, I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee, staring at my phone. Cal had texted me twice since the wedding, both messages carefully neutral, but with an undertone that made my pulse quicken. Hope you're okay after Saturday night, and thinking about you. I found myself typing and deleting responses, unsure how to navigate this new territory. Was I having an affair? We'd only kissed once, only spent time together at the gym and in a few coffee shops afterward. But the feelings were real, and they were growing stronger every day. My phone rang, interrupting my internal debate. My mother's name flashed on the screen. Darling, I've been thinking about Saturday night, Vivian said without preamble. You looked so happy dancing with that handsome young man, more alive than I've seen you in years. Mum, it wasn't... Oh, don't apologize to me. Life is short, Ulalia. You're 34 years old, not 94. If Malcolm can't appreciate what he has, maybe it's time he learned to. This was exactly what I'd expected from my mother, who'd never thought Malcolm was exciting enough for me. She'd married my father for stability and spent 20 years regretting it before their amicable divorce when I was in college. It's complicated, I said, but even as I spoke, I felt some of my guilt beginning to ease. Maybe she was right. Maybe I did deserve to feel appreciated, desired, alive. That afternoon, I found myself at the gym earlier than usual, telling myself I just needed to work off stress. But when Cal appeared beside me at the elliptical machine, my heart rate spiked for reasons that had nothing to do with cardio. "How are you holding up?" he asked, his voice low and concerned. "I'm fine," I said, then reconsidered. "Actually, I'm confused. My husband is acting like I betrayed him, but I don't feel like I did anything wrong. We kissed. So what? It's not like we're having an affair." Cal was quiet for a moment, matching my pace on his machine. "What would you call it then?" "I don't know. A connection, a friendship that got a little intense." "Is that all you want it to be?" The question made me stumble slightly on the elliptical. I looked at him, really looked at him, taking in his strong jawline, the way his workout shirt clung to his chest, the genuine interest in his eyes when he looked at me. "I don't know," I admitted. "I've never been in this situation before." "We could get coffee afterward," he suggested, "somewhere quiet where we can talk properly." I knew I should say no. I knew that coffee would lead to more conversations, more connection, more complications. But Malcolm's distant politeness was waiting for me at home, along with the same routine that had been slowly suffocating me for years. "Okay," I said, "but somewhere across town. I don't want to run into anyone we know." The coffee shop Cal chose was small and dimly lit, the kind of place where you could sit in a corner booth and feel invisible. We talked for 2 hours, about my marriage, about his last relationship that had ended when his girlfriend decided he wasn't serious enough, about dreams and disappointments, and the way life sometimes feels like it's passing you by. "You're not happy," he said finally, reaching across the table to touch my hand. "I'm not unhappy," I protested, but the words sounded weak even to me. "That's not the same thing." When I got home that night, Malcolm was helping Nora with her math homework at the kitchen table. They looked up when I walked in, and I felt like an intruder in my own house. "How was the gym?" Malcolm asked, his tone carefully neutral. "Fine. Good workout." I busied myself putting away my gym bag, avoiding his eyes. "Sorry I'm late. Lost track of time." "Mommy, will you help me with my book report?" Nora asked. "It's about families, and I want to write about our family." "Of course, sweetheart. What kind of family story do you want to tell?" "About how we go on adventures together and take care of each other and always love each other no matter what." The innocence in her voice made my chest tight. I glanced at Malcolm, who was watching me with an expression I couldn't read. "That sounds perfect, honey," I said. "We'll work on it this weekend." But as the days passed, I found myself making more excuses to stay late at the gym, to grab coffee with Cal, to avoid the quiet tension that had settled over our house like fog. I told myself I was just taking some space to figure things out, but I knew I was lying to myself as much as I was lying to Malcolm. The lies started small. "I'm working late to catch up on some claims." The gym was crowded, so my workout ran long. Traffic was terrible. Each deception came easier than the last, and I began to feel like I was living a double life. With Cal, I felt like the person I used to be before marriage and motherhood and mortgage payments. I was Ulalia again, spontaneous, interesting, desired. With Malcolm, I was just going through the motions of a life that felt increasingly like a costume that didn't fit anymore. "You seem different lately," Malcolm said one evening as we were getting ready for bed. Distracted. "I'm just stressed about work," I said, which wasn't entirely untrue. I had been putting in extra hours to make up for the time I was spending with Cal. and I'm trying to figure out what I want." "What do you mean?" I turned to face him, taking in his familiar features, the slight crow's feet around his eyes, the way his hair was starting to thin at the temples. He was a good man, a good father, a good provider, but when I looked at him, I didn't feel the spark that Cal ignited with just a text message. I mean, I'm 34 years old, and sometimes I feel like my life is already over, like I'm just going through the motions until I die. Malcolm was quiet for a long moment. "And you think spending time with Cal is going to change that?" The question caught me off guard. "How did you—" "I'm not stupid, Ulalia. You've been different since the wedding. Secretive, distant, and you mentioned his name twice last week when you were talking in your sleep." My face burned with embarrassment and defiance. "We're friends. We talk. He listens to me, which is more than I can say for some people." "I listen to you." "No, you hear me. There's a difference." Malcolm sat down on the edge of the bed, suddenly looking older than his 37 years. "So what do you want to do about it?" The question hung in the air between us. I could apologize, could promise to stop seeing Cal, could try to rebuild whatever we'd lost. Or I could be honest about the growing distance between us, about the way my heart raced when I thought about Cal, about the fact that I wasn't sure I wanted to be married anymore. "I don't know," I said finally. "I need time to figure it out." Malcolm nodded slowly. "Okay, but while you're figuring it out, I'm going to be doing the same thing, and I'm going to be paying attention to everything. Every choice you make, every lie you tell, every time you choose him over us. Because when this is over, however it ends, I want to make sure I understand exactly what happened to our marriage." His words should have been a warning, should have made me realize how serious this had become, how much I stood to lose. Instead, they felt like a challenge, another example of Malcolm trying to control the situation with his careful, methodical approach to everything. "Fine," I said, turning away from him. "Pay attention all you want." But as I lay in bed that night, listening to Malcolm's steady breathing beside me, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just crossed a line I couldn't uncross. And somewhere in the darkness, I wondered if that was exactly what I'd intended to do. By the third week after the wedding, I'd stopped pretending that what Cal and I had was just friendship. We were meeting 3 times a week now, sometimes at the gym, sometimes for coffee, once for lunch at a restaurant across town where I was certain we wouldn't run into anyone from my regular life. The conversations had grown more intimate, more charged with possibility. Cal would touch my hand when he made a point, let his fingers linger on my shoulder when he helped me with my coat. I found myself dressing more carefully on the days I knew I'd see him, choosing clothes that made me feel attractive and confident. "You're glowing," he told me one afternoon as we sat in our usual corner booth at the coffee shop. "Whatever you're doing, it's working." I laughed, feeling giddy and reckless. "Maybe it's the company I'm keeping." "Maybe it is." His eyes held mine across the table. "Ulia, I need to tell you something." My heart skipped. "What?" "I'm falling for you, hard, and I know the situation is complicated, but I can't keep pretending this is just casual friendship." The words I'd been both hoping for and dreading hung between us. Once he said them out loud, once I acknowledged what we both knew was happening, there would be no going back to innocent friendship. "Cal, I'm not asking you to make any big decisions right now," he said quickly. "I just needed you to know how I feel, how real this is for me." I reached across the table and took his hand, feeling the warmth of his skin against mine. "It's real for me too." That night, I came home to find Malcolm in the kitchen, making dinner with unusual focus. Nora was at the table, working on her homework, with more concentration than math problems usually required. "How was your day?" Malcolm asked without looking up from the stove. "Fine. Good. The usual." The lies came automatically now, but tonight they tasted bitter. "Smells good. What are you making?" "Your favorite, chicken masala with those roasted vegetables you like." I felt a pang of something, guilt maybe, or nostalgia for the woman who used to be excited by thoughtful gestures from her husband. Now it just felt like another item on Malcolm's list of ways to be a good husband. That's sweet of you. Mommy, Nora said suddenly, looking up from her math worksheet. Sarah's mum and dad are getting divorced. She says they fight all the time, and her mum cries a lot. Are you and Daddy getting divorced? The question hit me like cold water. Malcolm's hand stilled on the wooden spoon he was using to stir the sauce. Of course not, honey, I said automatically. Why would you ask that? Because you and Daddy don't talk much anymore. And you're always going somewhere after work. And Daddy looks sad sometimes when he thinks I'm not looking. Out of the mouths of babes. I glanced at Malcolm, who was still focused intently on the stove, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. Sometimes grown-ups go through difficult periods, I said carefully. It doesn't mean we don't love each other, or that we don't love you. But Sarah's parents said the same thing, and now her dad lives in an apartment and she only sees him on weekends. Malcolm finally turned around, his face carefully composed. Nora, your mom and I are working through some things, but we both love you very much. That will never change, no matter what happens. The phrase, no matter what happens, sent a chill through me. It sounded like he was already preparing her for the possibility that our marriage might not survive. After dinner, after Nora was in bed, Malcolm and I found ourselves alone in the living room for the first time in weeks. He was reading, or pretending to read, while I scrolled through my phone, responding to a text from Cal about meeting tomorrow. We need to talk, Malcolm said suddenly, closing his book. About what? About where this is going, about what you want, about what's best for Nora. I set down my phone, irritated by his serious tone. I told you I need time to figure things out. It's been 3 weeks, Ulalia. 3 weeks of you coming home later and later, being more and more distant, lying about where you've been and who you've been with. I haven't been lying. Malcolm reached into the side table drawer and pulled out a stack of papers. Credit card statements, I realized with a sinking heart. Coffee shop on 5th Street, Tuesday at 2 p.m. Lunch at Marcello's on Wednesday at 1 p.m. Parking garage downtown, Friday evening. He looked up at me. These aren't places you go for work or the gym, and they're not places you go alone, based on the amounts you're spending. My face burned with embarrassment and anger. You're spying on me now. I'm paying attention, like I said I would. You're having an affair, Ulalia. Maybe not a physical one yet, but an emotional affair that's getting more serious every day. It's not an affair. We're friends. Friends don't lie to their spouses about where they're going and who they're seeing. Friends don't sneak around and delete text messages and change their passwords on their phones. I hadn't realized he'd noticed that last detail, but he was right. I'd changed my phone password 2 weeks ago, telling myself it was just for privacy. So what if I have? Maybe I need something in my life that's just mine. Maybe I'm tired of feeling like I have to account for every minute of my day to you. Malcolm was quiet for a long moment, studying my face. Do you love him? The question hung in the air between us. I could have denied it, could have insisted it was just friendship, could have tried to minimize what was happening. Instead, I found myself being honest for the first time in weeks. I don't know. Maybe. I know I feel more alive when I'm with him than I have in years. And do you love me? That question was harder to answer. I loved the idea of Malcolm, loved our history together, loved the life we'd built. But did I love the man sitting across from me, looking at me with such careful control that I couldn't tell if he was heartbroken or relieved? I don't know that either, I admitted. Malcolm nodded slowly, as if this was the answer he'd been expecting. Okay, then I think you need to make a choice. Either you end things with Cal and we try to work on our marriage, or you don't, and we figure out how to end this as gracefully as possible. You're giving me an ultimatum. I'm giving you clarity. I won't share you, Ulalia. I won't sit here and watch you fall in love with someone else while pretending we're working on our marriage. And I won't let Nora grow up in a house where her parents are lying to each other and to her. His calm delivery made his words hit harder than if he'd been shouting. This wasn't anger talking or hurt pride. This was Malcolm making a rational decision based on the facts as he saw them. What if I'm not ready to choose? Then you've already chosen. I stared at him, this man I'd been married to for 10 years, and realized I was looking at a stranger. The Malcolm I knew would have fought for me, would have gotten emotional, would have tried to convince me to stay. This Malcolm was already 3 steps ahead, already planning for the possibility that I'd choose Cal. Fine, I said, standing up abruptly. I'll make a choice, but don't expect me to choose the safe, boring option just because it's what you want. I headed for the stairs, but Malcolm's voice stopped me. Ulalia. I turned back. When you make your choice, remember that it's not just about what you want, it's about what kind of person you want to be, and what kind of mother you want to be. His words followed me upstairs, where I lay awake until nearly dawn, staring at the ceiling and trying to figure out when my life had become so complicated. In the morning, I woke to find Malcolm's side of the bed empty again, and the sound of his laptop keys clicking steadily from his study. Whatever choice I made, I had the feeling he was already preparing for the consequences. The confrontation I'd been dreading finally happened on a Thursday afternoon at Bistro Cafe, the trendy spot downtown where Cal and I had been meeting regularly. We'd grown careless, comfortable in our routine, and I should have known it was only a matter of time before our separate worlds collided. I was laughing at something Cal had said, leaning across the small table with my hand resting on his arm, when I looked up to see Malcolm standing 3 feet away. He wasn't alone. Janet Lee from my office was with him, along with 2 other people I recognized from Nora's school events. The laughter died in my throat. "Hello, Ulalia," Malcolm said quietly. His voice was steady, but I could see the tension in his jaw, the way his hands were clenched at his sides. Cal straightened in his chair, suddenly looking less confident than he had moments before. "Malcolm, right? We met at the wedding." "We did." Malcolm's eyes moved between us, taking in our body language, the intimate way we were sitting, the guilty flush I could feel spreading across my face. "I was just having lunch with some friends and thought I'd say hello." Janet was staring at me with undisguised shock. We weren't close friends, but we'd worked together for 3 years, and she knew I was married. The other 2 people, parents from Nora's school, were trying to look anywhere but at our table. "It's not what it looks like," I said automatically, then immediately regretted the cliché. "What does it look like?" Malcolm asked, his tone conversational, but with an edge that made me nervous. I glanced around the cafe, suddenly aware that other patrons were starting to notice the tension at our table. A few were openly staring, probably recognizing the classic drama of a confrontation between spouses. "Maybe we should discuss this at home," I said, starting to gather my purse. "No, I think here is fine." Malcolm pulled out the empty chair at our table and sat down, uninvited. "After all, this seems to be where you prefer to have your important conversations these days." Cal shifted uncomfortably. "Look, man, I don't want any trouble." "Then you probably shouldn't have been pursuing a married woman for the past month." "It's not like that," I protested, but my voice sounded weak even to me. "What is it like then, Ulalia? Explain it to me. Explain it to Janet and the Hendersons here, who are probably wondering why Nora's mother is having secret lunches with her personal trainer." The public nature of the confrontation was making me feel trapped and defensive. This wasn't how I'd imagined this conversation going. In my mind, when the truth finally came out, it would be a private discussion between Malcolm and me, where I could explain my feelings and my needs without an audience. "You're embarrassing me," I hissed. "I'm embarrassing you?" Malcolm's careful control finally cracked slightly. "You're sitting here holding hands with another man in a public place where anyone we know might see you, and I'm the one embarrassing you." "We weren't holding hands," I said, which was technically true but missed the point entirely. "Right, you were just having an intimate conversation with your face 6 inches from his while touching his arm. Completely innocent." Cal stood up abruptly. "Maybe I should go." "Maybe you should," Malcolm agreed. And maybe you should think about whether pursuing married women is really the kind of man you want to be. Hey now, Cal said, his own temper finally showing. She's not happy in her marriage. She told me so herself. Maybe instead of blaming me, you should ask yourself why your wife needs to find companionship elsewhere. The words hung in the air like a challenge. I saw Malcolm's face go very still, and I knew Cal had just made a serious mistake. Is that what she told you? Malcolm asked quietly. That she's not happy? Cal glanced at me, suddenly realizing he might have said too much. I just meant, no, I think you meant exactly what you said, that my wife has been telling you intimate details about our marriage, about her unhappiness, probably about what a terrible husband I am. I could see Janet and the Hendersons backing away from our table, clearly uncomfortable with the direction this was heading. But Malcolm seemed oblivious to the audience now, focused entirely on Cal and me. That's not fair, I said. I never said you were terrible. Just boring, predictable, emotionally unavailable, unable to make you feel alive. Malcolm's voice was getting louder, and I realized he was reciting things I'd actually said to Cal, things I thought were private conversations. How do I know what you've been saying about me to your boyfriend? Because it's written all over both your faces. Because it's obvious from the way you look at me now, like I'm some kind of burden you're stuck with. Other customers were definitely staring now, some reaching for their phones. The last thing I needed was this scene ending up on social media, but I couldn't seem to find a way to diffuse the situation. Malcolm, please, let's go home and talk about this privately. Like you've been talking to me privately for the past month. Oh wait, you haven't been talking to me at all. You've been talking to him. Cal made another attempt to leave. I really think I should... Sit down, Malcolm said sharply. You're part of this conversation now. You wanted to be the other man. You can handle the consequences. I never meant for it to go this far, Cal protested, but he sat back down. How far did you mean for it to go? Malcolm asked. Just emotional infidelity. Just destroying my marriage and breaking up my daughter's family. Just helping my wife lie to me for weeks while she figured out if she wanted to trade me in for a younger model. It's not about age, I said desperately. It's about connection, about feeling understood and appreciated. And I don't understand or appreciate you. The question caught me off guard. Put so directly, it sounded petty and selfish. Malcolm did appreciate me, in his quiet way. He made my coffee the way I liked it, remembered important dates, supported my career goals. But that wasn't the same as the excitement I felt with Cal, the sense of being truly seen and desired. It's different, I said lamely. Different how? Because he's more exciting, because he doesn't have to deal with the reality of mortgages and parent-teacher conferences and all the boring responsibilities of actual adult life. Because he makes me feel like myself again, I said, my voice rising to match his. Because when I'm with him, I remember who I used to be before I became just your wife and Nora's mother. The words came out harsher than I'd intended, and I saw Malcolm flinch as if I'd slapped him. Just my wife, he repeated quietly. Is that really how you see yourself? I wanted to take it back, to explain what I'd meant, but the damage was done. Around us, the cafe had gone quiet, everyone listening to our marriage implode in real time. Malcolm stood up slowly, his face pale but composed again. Well then, I guess we both know where we stand. He turned to walk away, then stopped and looked back at Cal. Enjoy your prize, he said, but don't expect it to last. If she'll betray 10 years of marriage for excitement, what makes you think she won't do the same to you when someone more exciting comes along? As Malcolm walked out of the cafe, I felt the weight of dozens of eyes on me. Janet was shaking her head in disgust. The Hendersons were whispering to each other. Cal was staring down at his coffee cup like he wanted to disappear. Well, I said, trying to inject some lightness into the moment. I guess that's out in the open now. But Cal didn't smile. Maybe I should take some time to think about this, he said quietly. Think about what? About whether this is what I really want. About whether I'm ready for this kind of drama. A cold fear settled in my stomach. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe your husband has a point. Maybe we moved too fast, got too intense too quickly. I stared at him, this man I'd risked my marriage for, and realized he was already backing away now that the situation had real consequences. So that's it. One confrontation and you're done? Cal wouldn't meet my eyes. I just need some space to figure things out. As I watched him leave, I felt the full weight of what had just happened. In the span of 20 minutes, I'd lost my husband's respect, my co-workers' friendship, my reputation among other parents at Nora's school, and apparently Cal's interest as well. I sat alone at the table for another 10 minutes, finishing my coffee while people continued to stare and whisper. When I finally left, I could hear fragments of conversations behind me. Married woman. Poor husband. What about their daughter? The drive home felt like the longest 20 minutes of my life, and I knew that whatever was waiting for me, they would be worse than what I'd just left behind. When I got home, Malcolm was sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop open and a stack of papers beside him. He looked up when I walked in, his face completely neutral. How did it go with your boyfriend after I left? The casual tone of the question somehow made it worse than if he'd been shouting. He's not my boyfriend, and he said he needs space to think. Ah, Malcolm nodded as if this was exactly what he'd expected. So now that there are actual consequences, he's not so interested anymore. It's not like that. It's exactly like that, Ulalia, but that's not really the point anymore. I sat down across from him, noticing for the first time that the papers on the table were legal documents. My heart started racing. What are those? Divorce papers. I had them drawn up last week, but I was hoping I wouldn't need to use them. Last week? But I haven't even made my choice yet. Malcolm looked at me with something that might have been pity. You made your choice weeks ago. You just didn't want to admit it to yourself. I felt like the ground was shifting under my feet. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. I was supposed to have time to figure things out, to explore my feelings, to decide what I wanted without being rushed into anything. You can't just decide to divorce me without talking to me about it. I tried to talk to you about it, multiple times. You kept saying you needed more time while you continued your affair. It wasn't an affair. Malcolm opened his laptop and turned it toward me. On the screen was a video, security footage from the cafe, showing Cal and me in our usual corner booth. The timestamp showed it was from 2 weeks ago, and in the video, I was clearly leaning across the table to kiss Cal. My stomach dropped. Where did you get this? I hired a private investigator 3 weeks ago, after I realized you were lying about where you were going and who you were seeing. The screen changed to show photos, me and Cal walking into the coffee shop, sitting close together at various restaurants, him walking me to my car with his hand on my lower back. In every image, we looked like exactly what we were, two people having an affair. You had me followed. I had the truth documented, because I knew that when this all came out, you'd try to minimize it, try to make it seem like less than it was. I stared at the evidence of my betrayal, seeing it through Malcolm's eyes for the first time. It looked worse than I'd realized, more deliberate and calculated. I never meant for it to happen this way. But it did happen this way, and now we have to deal with the consequences. The front door opened, and I heard Nora's voice calling out that she was home from school. Malcolm quickly closed the laptop. Not a word about this in front of her, he said quietly. We'll tell her together when we've figured out the details. Nora bounced into the kitchen, her backpack sliding off her shoulder onto the floor. Hi, Mommy. Hi, Daddy. Can I have a snack? Of course, sweetheart, I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. How was school? As Nora chatted about her day, I watched Malcolm interact with her, patient, attentive, loving, and realized what I was about to lose. Not just my marriage, but this daily routine, these ordinary moments that I'd taken for granted. After Nora went upstairs to do homework, Malcolm and I sat back down at the table. What happens now? I asked. Now you decide whether you want to make this easy or difficult. I'm filing for divorce either way, but how we handle custody and finances depends on how cooperative you want to be. Custody? The word hit me like a physical blow. You can't take Nora away from me. I'm not taking her away from you, but I am asking for primary custody. On what grounds? Malcolm reopened his laptop and clicked through several files. Adultery, lying, emotional abandonment, creating an unstable home environment. Take your pick. That's not fair. I'm a good mother. You're a good mother when it's convenient for you. But for the past month, you've been more focused on your affair than on your daughter. You've missed 3 school events, forgot about her dentist appointment, and last week she asked me why you don't help her with homework anymore. Each accusation felt like a knife twist, partly because they were all true. I had been distracted, had been prioritizing my time with Cal over my responsibilities at home. I can change, I can be better. I'm sure you can, but I'm not willing to gamble Nora's stability on whether or not you will. The next few hours passed in a blur of legal terminology and logistics. Malcolm had clearly been planning this for weeks, maybe longer. He had documentation of everything: my affair, my lies, my neglect of family responsibilities. He'd already spoken to a lawyer, already figured out custody arrangements and financial settlements. You've been planning this all along, I said as the reality of the situation sank in. I've been preparing for the possibility since the night of the wedding. When you dared me to divorce you, I realized you might actually want me to. That was a joke. I was drunk and upset and I didn't mean it. Maybe, but then you spent the next month acting like you did mean it. That evening, after Nora was in bed, we had the conversation I'd been dreading. Malcolm laid out his terms. He would file for divorce on grounds of adultery, seek primary custody of Nora with supervised visitation for me initially, and ask for the house and primary assets given my affair and the instability it had created. Supervised visitation? Malcolm, she's my daughter. And you're her mother, but you're also someone who's been lying and sneaking around for weeks, putting your own desires ahead of your family's needs. The court will want to make sure you're focused on Nora's well-being, not on your next relationship. The word next stung, implying that Cal was already in the past tense. What if I fight this? What if I get my own lawyer? Malcolm was quiet for a long moment. Then I'll release everything. The photos, the videos, the documentation of every lie you've told. I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person you've become. You wouldn't. Try me. I stared at this man I'd been married to for 10 years and realized I'd never really known him at all. The quiet, predictable Malcolm I'd grown bored with was gone, replaced by someone calculating and strategic and completely in control of the situation. I need time to think about this. You have until Monday. After that, I'm filing the papers regardless of what you decide. That night, I lay in our bed alone. Malcolm had moved into the guest room and tried to figure out how my life had fallen apart so completely in the span of a single afternoon. 3 months ago, I'd been a wife and mother with a stable, if boring, life. Now I was facing divorce, potential loss of custody, and the complete destruction of my reputation. My phone buzzed with a text from Cal. Hey, I've been thinking about what happened today. Maybe we should take a break from seeing each other for a while. I stared at Cal's final message. Cold confirmation that the man I'd risked everything for was gone the moment consequences arrived. I deleted my unsent replies and turned off my phone. Morning light carried Malcolm and Nora's easy laughter from the kitchen. For the first time, I truly understood what I'd lost. Not just my marriage, but my place in my own family. Malcolm had been right. I'd chosen Cal weeks earlier. I'd simply refused to admit it. 6 months later, the courtroom smelled of wax and regret. Malcolm's evidence, lies, missed events, neglected responsibilities, was meticulously organized, painting me as a mother who'd chosen passion over her daughter. Judge Williams spoke plainly. My deception and affair showed a pattern of neglect. Primary custody went to Malcolm. I received supervised visitation every other weekend, no spousal support, and the family home stayed with him. Malcolm approached afterward, calm as ever. This wasn't revenge. It was about Nora's stability. He left me with the truth. I'd chosen excitement over commitment, and when Cal vanished, I'd tried to reclaim what I'd destroyed. Supervised visits were agonizing. Nora was polite but distant, asking why I left. I admitted it was a selfish choice that hurt everyone. Slowly, through counseling and consistency, trust began to rebuild. 8 months later, I earned unsupervised time. I live in a small apartment now, rebuilding quietly. Malcolm dates someone kind. Nora thrives. On her 10th birthday, I watched her smile in the home that was once mine and felt fragile peace. I demanded more than a good life and learned the hardest lesson. Sometimes getting exactly what you want costs everything that truly matters.